most of us right now. We will have some time for some questions. I'll try to monitor Facebook as well in case there are any questions. But let me just mute everybody. You'll have the opportunity to unmute yourself at that time. But it is a real honor for us to welcome a man who I have heard. I just got an Amber Alert. Sorry about that. I imagine many of you are as well, and there's no way for me to stop that. Sorry about that. I have had the opportunity to hear Marvell speak on several different occasions. I wish we had different reasons to bring him here today and talk, but he is an important person for us to learn and learn from and listen to and speak with. I asked Josh Donner to join us today. Josh is the regional director for AIPAC, and I don't know who was more excited to see each other, Josh or Marvell. They're fans of each other, and I asked Josh to basically introduce this incredible guy today. So I'm going to turn the spotlight over to Josh, and then we'll hear from Marvell.
Well, Rabbi, thank you for inviting me, onto this call. I am very excited not only to, have the distinct honor of introducing my very good friend Marvell, but also to participate in your community virtual gathering. So I really do appreciate that. And just, off the bat, Marvell is certainly a friend to the pro-Israel community. He's also a friend to me personally. And this is going to be one of those we knew him when moments. So I think we're all very, very fortunate to have Marvell spending his time with us this afternoon. So Rabbi, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to everyone for joining in on this important conversation. I would also like to say that AIPAC does stand shoulder to shoulder with the Black community during this time. Now, with that, I will introduce Marvell so we can get the conversation started. Marvell Joseph is a student at Florida Atlantic University, majoring in economics. Prior to transferring to FAU, Marvell was a student leader at the Florida State University, serving as director of the FSU Black Male Initiative, a program created by the Officer of the Vice President of Student Affairs to increase retention and graduation rates of Black males on campus. During the 2018 Florida legislative session, Marvell was a legislative assistant to State Representative Al Chiquette. Marvell served as a Diamond Summer Intern, working directly in the AIPAC headquarters in Washington, D.C., within the political department. During this time, Marvell tracked races within key congressional districts, while also helping to research legislation strengthening the U.S.-Israel relationship. At FAU, Marvell has helped reestablish AIPAC, a pro-Israel organization focused on educating student leaders on the importance of the U.S.-Israel relationship, and he has also spoken not only locally, but nationally at AIPAC's policy conference and at many of our pro-Israel gatherings. So with that, enough of me, I'll turn it right over to Marvell.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh, for your kind words, and of course, for being a great friend. And thank you to Rabbi Jacobs for seeing it fit to bring me onto your platform to discuss the issues that are impacting my community, but in reality, are really just issues that are plaguing our country. The past few weeks for all of us have been a challenging time. As we watch stories develop and opinions fly from commentators and personalities, I've reflected on one quote constantly. In the book, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Hemingway writes a quote that during a time like this, we can all learn from. Today is only one day in all the days that will ever be. But what will happen in all the days that ever come can depend on what you do today. Each day on the news, there has been a consistent and constant cry by millions of people, calling for justice, calling for equality, and calling for peace. Many would assume that these protests and riots we have seen are results of the police brutality that led to the death of George Floyd. But truthfully, what we are witnessing is the rage that has built up within the souls of Black people for years. The anger that comes from witnessing oppression and a failed system rule our communities for centuries. It's the pain that mothers feel when their son leaves the house with a hoodie on to go down to the corner store to buy some Skittles and an Arizona iced tea, but is perceived as a thug and is killed merely because he looked like he was committing a crime. Or it's the agony of a father receiving the news that his son was lynched in broad daylight by racists who saw that man as nothing more than an effing nigger. These aren't the stories of the 50s and 60s. These are the realities of today. These are the stories of Trayvon Martin and Ahmaud Arbery. These are the stories that keep up my parents at night, fearful that one day it might be their son. And as members of the pro-Israel family, we all believe that no one should live in fear. See, that's why we invest so much time, money, and effort into supporting organizations like AIPAC to ensure that we can keep a strong Israel. We spend time learning about the issues that affect the country we love so dearly in an effort to become more educated on how we can play our part in the fight to ensure that Israel and its people stay safe. And during a time like this, we must use those same principles in the fight for justice here back at home. As members of this great nation and as people who care, we have the ability to change our nation for the better. And now, before we transition into your questions, I want to leave you with a little portion of my story, a story that I love so dearly because of how important it is to who I am today. I am the son of 2 Haitian immigrants. My Haitian roots are part of the reason why I have the ability to sit in front of this camera and profess my love for Israel. On January 12, 2010, a 7.0 magnitude earthquake hit the island of Haiti. From just the earthquake, more than 250,000 people died, while many others were trapped under debris, crying out for help. Among these were my family members and my friends, people whose voices I still hear on the quietest of days, and faces I see in the deepest of my dreams. Food, water, and medical supplies were all scarce. And the hope that my country of Haiti had was now gone. But somehow, even with all the collapsed buildings, lack of roads, and little to no room to properly function, the Israeli Defense Forces still made a way to Haiti. In fact, they were one of the first countries to arrive, even while being over 12 hours away. Now, as much as we'd like to take the credit and say that it's in Jewish nature to help, and trust me, I know firsthand how kind my Jewish friends are, this wasn't just a random act of kindness. During World War II, when the entire world turned its back on German Jews, Haiti opened up its doors. And Haitians sold their passports to Jewish families so that they could seek refuge in Haiti. Then during the partition vote in the United Nations to create the Jewish state, it was Haiti who casted the deciding vote, bringing life to the country that the Zionists dreamed of for so many years. The act of Israel after the earthquake was deliberate and intentional, an act of helping an old friend in need. It is from this friendship that I told myself that I would always fight for Israel and its people, because that's what my ancestors had done. That was our makeup as a people. It was now up to me to continue that friendship in everything. But now today, I come to you as not just a Haitian, but as a fellow American. An American who was a victim of the injustices, racism, hate, and bigotry that permeates itself through different means. My friends, the Black community, my community needs your help. We have the chance to rekindle a friendship, We have the opportunity to build that bridge between our communities once again. A bridge that for me started with my ancestors in Haiti and only manifested itself year after year. A connection that was sparked by the friendship of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and Dr. Martin Luther King during the civil rights movement. A kinship that provides hope, strength, and a promise to a better future. It begins with education. We must educate ourselves, realizing the biases that we hold, the prejudices that we use to make our decisions. We must hold those in power to a standard of accountability for all their actions. And the same way we call out anti-Semitism for what it is the same way we must call out racism, bigotry, and hate for what it is too. In order for our country to be one that is truly for the people, our country must clean its inequities and injustices that has stained the souls of my community. We must do so through change. For the George Floyds who didn't become a hashtag, the Ahmaud Arbery's and Trayvon Martins whom we simply do not know about, may their memory be for a blessing. For the Breonna Taylors, Sandra Bland's, Atiana Jeffersons, who were taken unjustly and unfairly, may their memory be a revolution. Today is only one day in all the days that will ever be. But what will happen in all the days that ever come can depend on what you do today. Thank you.
Thank you. Can all kind of take a breath, take that in. And I know a lot of the folks on this group and the folks on Facebook probably have some questions. So what I'm going to ask as we moderate this to the best of our ability here is, if you have a question, many of you know how to raise your hand in the using your camera, hitting those three dots and raising your hand. So I invite you, if you have a question, to share that there. I have some questions that some folks have shared with me if I should start things, but if anybody does, or even if you just don't want to overstep on people, if you do want to just unmute yourself and ask your question, and then just make certain you mute yourself back up. But I'll give everybody the opportunity, if there are questions here, to ask. This is never a quiet group, so. I will, I'll Hillary, Mrs. Tesher, please, I will unmute you.
Hi, well, it was wonderful to hear you speak. Thank you so much. And it gives me hope that we have people like you in the world. Said like an old lady, but it really does. So can we just address the elephant in the room though, which to me is the Black Lives Matter movement, not that Black Lives Matter, but the actual movement with a manifesto that is anti-Israel. How can we just address that? How do we get around that? Like, I'm happy to make a contribution to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, but the actual movement of Black Lives Matter presents a struggle for me. How does it for you?
So there's a few things that I think about when I think of the organization Black Lives Matter. It does provide a struggle whenever I get that question, mainly because of like how much I support Israel. But the main thing that I look at in the Black Lives Matter movement itself is two things. One, the people that included the bylaws of any anti-Israel rhetoric were not Black. They weren't Black. They weren't like the forefront of the people. They were just the people, the allies of the Black community, who saw it fit to, okay, well, since you guys are fighting for Black Lives Matter, let's just throw this into your constitution as well. And because of the lack of engagement, or knowledge on the issue, people just let it go by. If you go on the Black Lives Matter movement right now, in their 2020 plan for electing people, they haven't mentioned anything about Israel. Now, with that being said, it provides us a challenge and an opportunity to actually change that mindset. When we look at the reason why it was so easy for anti-Israel rhetoric to be included within the Constitution and bylaws of the Black Lives Matter movement, it was because the allies that they formed were people of the anti-Israel movement. On campuses, if you think about it, SJP has such great success because it shows up for its friends, right, being the Black community. Now we know historically the Black community and the Jewish community have been friends, but we've fallen off. Our relationship has become a little bit shaky. And during that time, anti-Israel groups saw it fit to pick up where the Jewish community worked so hard to build that relationship and said, you know what, we're gonna start fighting for you. I was on Twitter a few days ago, and it was really disturbing when I saw how Palestinian groups, like pro-Palestinian anti-Israel groups, were actually tweeting out stuff that said something along the lines of, Palestinians have been marching with us since Ferguson. You know, that the struggle from Ferguson to Palestine was so similar because we were being oppressed by the same entity. Now, for people who don't do any research or who don't know much about the conflict, that's such an easy thing to go by and just assume is correct. So I think with all that, I say all that to say this, it's our job as the pro-Israel community to take a stand on what we accept and what we don't. And it's also our job to actually build the relationships that can actually help the pro-Israel movement as well too.
Marla, if I can just jump in, are you at all familiar with helping us understand Black Lives Matter versus the Movement for Black Lives organization?
Mm-hmm.
Because we actually as a class, you know, we went on Tuesday, we looked at the Black Lives Matter website, and there's really nothing on there that anybody who supports Israel could really have a problem with. The Movement for Black Lives has put out some things, but they're different. My understanding is they're different organizations. Yeah. So
very different organizations. M4BL is very anti-Israel and very, very progressive group that just does not believe in the existence of Israel. The Black Lives Matter movement is the hashtag Black Lives Matter, which has become its own organization after the police brutality incidents and the racist incidents. Two different organizations that serve two different purposes. Now their common goal is the fighting for Black lives, but it's the same thing like in any organization. The common goal of, like with Josh being here, the common goal of AIPAC and the common goal of the Federation or JCC serves different communities, but at the end of the day, it's to progress the advancement of the Jewish people. Unfortunately, M4BL's movement is not something that I can agree with, mainly because of its anti-Israel stances, but they still believe in the advancement of Black people.
Mark Steinberg, see your hand is up.
Myself, unfortunately, I stopped my video by accident. I have two questions for you. One is, when you see what's going on in Seattle with Chaz, how do you view that action in the greater scheme? And then how do you reconcile a government that's standing for law and order versus a movement that wants to reorganize police or have police reform?
So can you restate the first question? I'm sorry.
So in Seattle, they took one of the precincts and they renamed it to Chaz, like a police-free author is, you know, some zone or something. I can't remember what it stands for. And they've sectioned it off. How do you see actions like that fitting into the greater movement? And then how do you reconcile a government that wants law and order versus a movement that wants to reform police?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a political stance. So I think for me, the biggest thing that I try to say during times like this is that the police, like the police movement and like police reform and law and order is just one facet of a very, very complex issue. For me, although police brutality is obvious, like police reform is really, really needed, there are many, many other things that we're still fighting for, like economic reform, education reform, healthcare reform. So I personally don't know much about this Chaz thing that's going on. So I don't want to provide you with like the wrong the wrong information. Now, in terms of supporting a president that believes in law and order, rhetoric means everything. So even if he believes that, he was saying this in a way that wasn't used to incite violence, you know, actions speak louder than words. And that's kind of like how I feel about that.
Is there, we have a wide age group watching and here on Facebook. We have high school kids, we have adults, we have parents, grandparents. Are there specific, and this might sound overly simplistic, and I don't mean it to sound that way, but a lot of people have asked me specifically, what can we do? A lot of people are, posting on Facebook. I don't think that's enough. So I'm just wondering, if there are specific things to do, and if there are certain organizations, if some of us are not comfortable or we're still confused with Black Lives Matter, certainly there are other organizations out there that are doing incredible things. So just curious, what are some takeaways that we can do and start doing, when we finish this Zoom call?
I think the biggest thing is education. I'm a strong proponent of education, mainly because I think the only way that we can actually advance as a people and as a nation is when we understand what communities are actually going through. The reason we can say that people are strong pro-Israel supporters is because of how much education they know, or how much they know about the conflict, the ability to refute false claims, the ability to stand even when no one else in the room agrees with you, but knowing that you have the truth. That's the first thing. The second thing is educating the ones that are around us. I was watching the late night show with Stephen Colbert, and he was interviewing a guy by the name of Emmanuel Acho, who is a former football player. He created a platform called Conversations with a Black Man. And I would suggest that you all to watch it, mainly because he has the conversations about explaining the difference between African American and Black. For me, I'm a Black American, not an African American, mainly because my roots don't start in the United States. They start in Haiti. Of course, they start in Africa, but I can trace myself back to my Haitian family. That's a big difference for a lot of people who feel as if African American is the politically correct term, but my best friend's Nigerian, so he's actually African American, as opposed to me, who's Haitian American. So I think that's the biggest thing. Then it's also looking at the boards that we sit on, and understanding the communities that we're in. Israel has a growing Ethiopian Jewish community. The discrimination that a lot of Ethiopian Jews face is very similar to the discrimination that a lot of Black Americans face too. So it's understanding how we can reform Israel. It's understanding how we can reform the communities that we're in. It's understanding that we have the ability to actually include more people within the conversations that we are having to educate ourselves and the greater nation at that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I've got a question.
You're muted, I think, aren't you?
No, he's not. It's good.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, are you aware of any efforts or plans to harness the energy that we've seen over the past week or so into votes? Because essentially that's the only one of the best ways to make the kind of changes that you're speaking about.
So there are a few things that have happened. They've actually seen, according to a recent study that came out, during these past 2 weeks of protests, they've actually seen a 1.5 million person increase in the amount of Black Americans that have registered to vote. So huge numbers have gone up in the number of people registered to vote. There has also been, just within the past 2 weeks, huge reform at the city level and in the local government levels within places such as Seattle, Louisville. I believe many of these, so in Louisville, actually, they have the Breonna Taylor law that they just introduced, which was a law that actually prohibits no-knock warrants, which is what killed Breonna Taylor. The cops went into the wrong house and killed her in her sleep. So it's things like that that have actually been going. We understand that the need that in order to change situations, it has to start at the top, but there has actually been small increases, small victories, I guess we could say, that have been benefiting the Black community at the political level. Now, the question is, how do we continue to harness this energy into other things too? Voting is just one aspect of it. It's also the importance of, economic reform within our communities, equal distribution within the education system. I had the opportunity of going to a pretty well-funded school, but my friends didn't. And the quality of education that I got compared to the quality of education they got was night and day. And these are kids that grew up down the street from me. So it's small things like that that we can use to continue to fight the system.
Other questions?
I would like to say something.
Who's that?
This
Julie?
is Julie. Yes. Hi. I loved listening to you. I'm a pre-K teacher, and I have been working in the inner city in Miami for 29 years. And I would say that I've given my heart and soul to what I've done and to the students and the families that I teach. And I definitely agree with you that education is first and foremost, but so is breaking the cycle. And I've witnessed a lot of things in 29 years. And this past week, I've been unfriended by people that I thought were my friends. I've been told I was white privileged. I was told that I would never understand. And I'm here on this forum today, and I live my life with my heart and trying to not see color. And I think education has to be on our side and on the Black people or African American people, whatever term I should use today. And I think it needs to be a conversation on both sides. That's all I want to say, because it's very hard for me to be on this seat and not feel a certain way when I've been belittled and unfriended and called names just because of who I am. So I just needed to share that. I know you're trying to bridge the gap, and I appreciate you for that. I had to say my piece. I'm sorry.
No, I understand. I think even though you didn't ask a question, I think the main reason we've seen a lot of disagreements, I guess is the best term to use, between the white and Black community is because for years, we've both communities, I guess, have kind of shielded our eyes and closed our ears to what the other community had to say. And I think after years, one of the quotes that I actually think about a lot is by James Baldwin, and he says, to be Black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage. And when he was describing that rage, he was describing the fact that for millions of Black Americans that grow up in the United States, the idea of breaking the cycle that's all it is, just the idea. Many times Black families don't have the opportunity to go to college. And if they do go to college, many times they don't have the opportunity to graduate. During my time as the Black Male Initiative president, one of the biggest things that we saw was that the majority of Black students who were the majority of Black men who came into Florida State was significantly lower each and every year. So our retention rate for Black men at one point was 17%. The graduation for Black men was much lower than that. So it is understanding both sides, but it is being able to be teachable, to hear the other side. We might not agree with everything that the other side has to say, but it's the fact that we know that there is another side and that we're both entitled to our own opinions.
And I really respect you saying that. And Julie, I commend you for putting that, what was probably a difficult statement for you to make. I think that one of the things that I have noticed is lacking is just the ability to have these safe discussions and say, I'm feeling this. It doesn't mean I don't want to be called this. I'm watching some of the things going on social media and people, taking each other's words and getting so angry. And I don't think social media is necessarily the place to be having these types of discussions. It gets lost in translation. And I think that being able to share openly and honestly is what's going to make a difference. And that means we have to be able to say things we might not be comfortable with. Maybe we're afraid to say it. We don't know what's right. We don't know what's wrong. And then at the same time, hear it from others and be able to respond, not from a place necessarily, especially if it's people we're close with, of rage and anger, but of, as you say, Marvell, of education, because we don't know if we don't talk about it. And that's where there's this beautiful teaching in Judaism about, we have this obligation. It's I don't like the word of rebuking, but if somebody does something wrong, we have an obligation to take them aside quietly and say, listen, you said something or you did something, and here's what it felt like and why. And that's the only way we're going to learn. And I think we've stopped doing that as a society, and that's a small part of this challenge.
I also think, to add to that too, I also think that it comes from, like when we look at the fight against police brutality affects all communities. It's not just a white issue or a Black issue. So when these marches are saying reform the police, it's just something that all people should be able to agree with. For too many years, we have seen individuals who have been treated poorly by the police. So the fact that the Black community is on the forefront of it, and many people like to refute with, well, blacks kill more Blacks than the cops do. This isn't a Black-white issue. This is the fact that the police system that is designed to protect and serve its community has continuously failed its community, and the Black community is just tired of it.
I have a question from Facebook, and Alan, I see you here.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Julie. No. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I want you to know that I stand with you. I also want to just say that not all police are bad, just like not all teachers are bad, just like not all doctors are bad. And I feel for the injustices that are happening, but when we put everybody in one category, that's when the divide happens. So
I agree with that statement. My cousin's a police officer.
I'm sorry, I'm going to cry. I'm so emotional.
I think this is a conversation we can have. I think what we are complaining about is not that police are bad. What we're complaining about is the fact that police can be bad and go unchecked. What we're complaining about is the fact that there are good cops that are refusing to call the bad cops. And the same way that we call out anti-Semitism and those that surround an anti-Semite as a bystander in a situation is the same way we need to call out these good cops who are refusing to check their privilege and to check their coworkers who are doing the wrong thing. I think one of the most beautiful things we saw was that a cop saw another cop push one of the protesters who was peacefully protesting and immediately chastised him in front of everybody. That's what we're calling for. We understand that not all cops are bad cops. I know that. But the same way that we say that there's the same way that as a teacher, you probably said that one bad apple can ruin recess for everyone, is the same way that our one bad cop can ruin the perception of all cops. It's the fact that when I drive down like I-95 late at night, if I get pulled over, the first thing I think is, I hope this cop isn't a racist cop. That shouldn't be the thought process that goes into the mind of Black people each and every day as they drive downtown. It should be, well, okay, this cop, I was in the wrong, not, okay, I hope he doesn't find something or try to accuse me of doing something that I didn't do. That's what this conversation of there's no such thing as good cops. I mean, they're not all cops are bad cops and things like that.
And
I just want to just jump in, Julie, when you said you're emotional. I think for a lot of us, talking about this and the fear of talking about this brings up so many emotions. I shared a story with the group on Tuesday. I have a woman who I work with at one of the local funeral homes. And one of the things I was told, and I felt funny about it, and for those of you who heard this, I apologize, but I was told that as somebody who's white, to reach out to everybody I know who's Black or African American and just let them know you're here. So the first call I made on, I've lost track of the days, was to this woman, and I got on, and I was actually nervous, and I said, I don't really know what to say right now. I just want you to know that I'm thinking about you. And she started to wail on the other side of the line. And I thought, oh my God, I offended her. And I started apologizing. And she said, no, please. She said, I haven't gone to the protests. I don't want to be, I can't do that. She said, I have kept this inside. And you just calling to check on me and admitting that you don't know the right thing to say or the wrong thing to say. She said, I found that so touching and moving. And to me, it's that rawness, it's that genuine human connection of just reaching out to each other. And so, Julie, you sharing that and saying that just reminds me that if we tap into that, I think we're going in the right place. So thank you for that. And Marvell, for you doing that. I want to share a question from online. I'm going to read it here from Facebook. So Marvell, do you feel like when people say they don't see color, that's actually part of the problem, meaning that we need to see people's color and culture and history and acknowledge it, and that understand that their story is different? And I've talked to a couple people about that this week. So.
Mm-hmm. I think it is important to see color, because people that say that they don't see color when it comes to race are probably not telling the full truth, mainly because the biases that we hold are based on the people that we see. Now, the thing that we need to do is see color and appreciate people for who they are. The same way that we treat our white counterparts is the same way that we should treat our Black coworkers. The notion behind I don't see color is something that kind of confuses me a lot, because when you don't see color, it means you also don't see culture. You also don't see history. You don't see that some people that grew up differently than you, basically. That's really all I can say about that piece.
when I'm going to just add to that, because I was the one who said that. When I say that I don't see color, when I walk into my classroom, I'm white and my children are Black. I don't teach based on that. I teach from my heart. I teach them to love one another. I teach them to show kindness and empathy.
Mm.
I have Spanish kids in my class. I have Haitian kids in my class. I have regular African-American kids in my class. And I don't want to draw a notice to everyone's differences. I want us to come together for what is the same. And maybe I'm a little, cuckoo in my thinking, but we're drawn together by one thing, and that's love. And that's what I want everybody to see, not from our differences. I'm so sorry,
So
That-
Julie, I don't think that question was directed at you. That's a question I've heard from lots of people.
Yeah.
So no worries. I think it's an important question because I myself have often said that we as a synagogue community, I mean, we have lots of Black and brown kids. And I've often said we don't see color, but I've realized only through discussions like this that one, I don't know if it's true, and two, it is denying an important part of somebody's identity when we say that. And we're not saying it, I would argue, you, Julie, and anybody on this room that would say it, it's not saying it from a place of being discriminatory, but in saying it where we are erasing a part of somebody's, of who they are. And it would be like, if people would look at me and don't understand that I'm Jewish. I love my Judaism. I don't want to hide it. I don't want people not to know it's a part of me. So I think it's an important thing. And I was not direct. I apologize, Julie. That was not directed at you. That came from somebody on Facebook, somebody who's been talking to me about it for a while. So, Alan, you have a question. You've been waiting patiently.
I want to go back to something that Aaron said about voting and also what Marvell said about the number of people that have registered. The voting turnout in local elections is abysmal. And the way to change policing and education and hospitals and what districts the local hospitals are in are voting for mayors and city council people and even governors. I mean, we all saw what went on in Georgia with the election on Tuesday. That's not something that comes from the national government. That's what comes from the local government.
Absolutely.
So there has to be, not just in the Black community, but in every community. And I would guess, even if we surveyed our congregation, the percentage of people that vote for president every 4 years is way higher than the people that vote for their city councilman. But that affects their lives so much more greatly. So I think that when we talk about voting, the emphasis has to be on local voting.
I was actually, I'm sorry, go ahead, go.
No, I was gonna say, I agree with that completely. And I think that is something that voter registration groups are actually trying to focus on more. Because I think if you looked at the most productive and most responsive cities during this time, they've all been in cities where the voter turnout amongst all communities has been very high. So I completely agree with that. And I do believe that that's something that a lot of organizations are striving to change.
I was actually quite shocked to learn that, and I checked a couple of different sites. I'm on a community-wide call tonight with a couple of our elected leaders and other religious leaders to discuss voting and how it relates to this entire situation. And one of the issues is that in Broward County, the percentage of African-American and Black and brown elected leaders is quite small. And when I look to see that 30% of the community in Broward County is Black or brown, and then 30% of another 30% is Latino, you realize when you start to look at all of our elected officials with this issue of voting and things are definitely skewed in a way that doesn't portray the population of the county. So that's, it's something very important for us to think about and talk about and figure out the whys and hows. And I'm no expert on it, but in preparation for my call tonight, that was something I've been looking at. So, Sandy, sorry about that. Thank you, Mark. Somebody's telling me, oh, Sandy, are you raising your hand maybe on the screen? Sandy Babchick, go ahead, you can talk.
Okay. Marvel, would like to hear your reaction in the last few weeks as compared to maybe other people's lives that have been so dramatically affected. I now hear, and Rabbi, not to pick on you, but we say black and brown. And then I want to know, have we complicated? Do you talk about different cultures? My daughter is considered brown and black, and it affects her differently depending upon you and who she's with. What comes to mind along with that is how you view Haitian American versus African American. So I don't want to get sidetracked, but black.
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think first of all, I think it's a great question. I also think it's very important that we understand the difference between Black people and people of color first. That's a big disparity too, because people of color includes all non-white people. So that includes Asians, people from the Middle East, people from like Latin America. From my understanding of what it means to be brown, it means people that are from Latin America, India, people who have color, like pigmentation within their skin, but are not necessarily the descendants of African slaves, people who were enslaved in the United States. So for me, when I say that I'm Haitian American, it's because my family is from Haiti. I'm a first generation American. I was born in the United States. My brother and I were both born in the United States, but growing up in this house, we grew up in a Haitian household. We continued Haitian culture. So my culture is rooted in Haiti, even though my skin color is Black.
So what do you think is promoting, or am I just exaggerating this point, Black and brown people? It seems to be coming out.
Well, I think it's this it's just pure intersectionality. We're trying to be inclusive of all people who are facing injustices. I guess the idea of being brown, as a brown person, they probably are perceived in a certain way by those who are white, the same way a Black person might be perceived as a person that's white. It's kind of like me, like if I was walking down the street, you wouldn't be able to tell if I was Haitian, Jamaican, African, or African American. You'd be able to see that it's a Black person. And for a lot of brown people, that's what they probably experience too. So we're not necessarily complicating things. What we're doing is we're trying to include those people who are not necessarily from the African American descendants of African Americans, but who are actually facing similar issues that the Black community is facing too, merely because of the skin color.
Great. Is it just to clarify, because I have been told that that the correct terminology we should be referring to is Black and brown, and that we should not be using the term African American. It's, is that accurate? It's very confusing for some of us, and I don't want to ever say the wrong thing. So somebody just asked me that question, so I wanted to share that.
I've heard a lot of different arguments, and I think all the arguments provide strong context. I guess for me, the reason that I go with the terminology of Black is because when I think of African American history, the history of the people who are within this country, that's very, very different to what my history is. Very, very similar in the sense of we were both enslaved people. I was enslaved, my people were enslaved in Haiti and theirs in the United States. But my country and like being Black in Haiti is being Black in Haiti. Being Black in America is being Black in America. If that makes sense, I guess.
Well, and it's interesting. And if you look at some of the Middle Eastern countries, I look at like Egypt.
Yeah.
There's
most of North Africa.
And the discrimination between, say, the brown people who have lighter skin against the Black people from Africa can be, there's terrible discrimination there, just like in Israel and other places. It's this is a problem that's all over the world. It's a plague
I think that goes into when I mentioned the multiple facets of this fight of justice. We also have the fight of colorism, where it's no longer, oh, you're African and I'm not. It's, oh, your skin is dark and mine isn't. We see it in, I think when you speak with Ethiopian Jews, that's a discrimination that they face. Not necessarily, it's not systemic. It's not, because Ethiopians were never slaves in Israel, but it's the fact that they have darker skin that makes them perceived a certain way, that makes them have to be treated a certain way.
Sandy Dagan, I think you're on here. You just texted me that you have some questions. So just unmute yourself and there you go.
Thank you. So I have a comment and a question. So I'm also an educator, and when you're talking about people not seeing color, I really feel like children who are fortunate enough to grow up in a diverse community and go to a diverse school and have parents who do not pass down prejudices, I really don't think these kids do see color. Now, you were saying how important it is to see color so that you appreciate people's backgrounds and cultures and differences, and I agree. But I think that most good teachers will teach them about, appreciating differences and about the different backgrounds and cultures of different people. And I think that most kids these days who do grow up in a diverse culture, I mean, they just, they like people who are good and they don't like people who aren't good.
Absolutely.
So that's my comment.
Okay.
And you ready for my question?
Yes, no, yeah.
Okay. So I want to back up to what Hillary said, when she was talking about the Black Lives Matter, the Constitution, and how there's anti-Israel sentiment in it. So between Zoom and Facebook, you have an incredibly passionate group here. So, Rabbi Andrew asked about, anything that we can do. So is there anything that we can do to try to change this? Because I think, the whole idea behind Black Lives Matter in general, we are all for it. But it is, I'd love to see that removed from the Constitution so that I could fully appreciate and support this group. So what can we do?
Well, I think for one thing, there are more than just one Black Lives Matter group. That's the biggest one. And I'm actually going to tell you the name of a great organization. So there's two that don't talk about Israel in their constitution in any way. One of them is the Black Economic Alliance, which focuses on educating / lobbying politicians to support an economic policy agenda focused on improving economic outcomes for African Americans in 3 core areas: work, wages, and wealth. In fact, the executive director went on an AIPAC trip. He's an alum of AIEF. And the second one is Campaign Zero, which focuses on the 8 policies that, if implemented, could reduce police violence by an estimated 70%.
It's a great website.
Yeah, 8 can wait. Yeah. So those are the 2 organizations that I would suggest. Rabbi, I can send you that information over later.
Yeah, sure. And I have those, and I'll post those on. I'm just writing all that stuff down too, because those are really, really good. Whatever Israel or Jewish organization that you support, these are like equivalents. I mean, these are well-run
organizations.
Yeah. Not to say that others aren't or are, but this is good. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's the same way that when we're very meticulous on which organizations we donate to on other issues, is the same way that we can still believe in justice and believe in fighting for equality and still be very meticulous on who we donate money to in this capacity as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we can't thank you enough for sitting with us for an hour and talking. One final question, and Mark Steinberg kind of, he took my words, he posted it to me in the chat here, is I'm already noticing now that the protests are continuing, but they're not attracting news cameras because they are what they should be, which is peaceful. And now we're talking about the numbers of COVID cases increasing. We have a problem in this country. George Floyd's death was horrific, but nobody, this has happened, as you said, before.
Absolutely.
Your parting wisdom on how we don't have to, how can this keep moving forward in a positive way? How can these discussions continue and the education continue, and what can we do so that, you know, Julie talked about the cycle. How can we once and for all, as a sophisticated country, why are we still dealing with this? How can we stop this? I know that's a huge question.
Yeah. I can't stress this enough, and I guess it's just education, but I guess on the other side, it's holding our elected officials accountable on all levels of government. And I think I said this earlier, where if there was ever a politician who was anti-Israel, we would ensure that, you know, they were never elected again. You know, we would make sure that we voted for a pro-Israel candidate every single time. And the way we do that, I believe, has to be similar to the way that we hold our elected officials accountable to. We have to make sure that they are promoting equality in all their legislation, right? There can't be any half-stepping in any legislation that they make. And it also has to be more than just performative politics. Now, I'm thankful for everything that the mayor of DC did, painting Black Lives Matter on the, you know, on the floor, on the road and all this stuff. That's great, but what about policy? What are you going to do, right, to ensure that, like you mentioned, that this George Floyd incident never happens again? Now, of course, racism is something that is taught. So we need to ensure that we're teaching our future generations to love, like Miss Julie said, like teaching the children that we see to love, teaching them that it's okay to be different, right? We should love everyone for their differences and not hate in any form. But it's also smaller things too, like, you know, just understanding that we are different, understanding that there is a history that kind of makes times like these very, very tough. Those are the things I think we can do in order to move forward. And I hope that actually helps.
It does. And you being with us and letting folks ask some questions that were not easy for them to ask, and you sharing such important information. I agree with you that it's dialogues like this that will inspire us and keep things moving, and for you to give of your time when you are really, I mean, I think that Josh is correct. This is we just remember us when, right? Because the world needs you right now. And we are grateful for your support of Israel, and we are grateful for your willingness to teach us. And I hope that this is not, you know, the last time that we get together. That this is the beginning of a great conversation, and keep doing what you're doing because the world needs it.
Thank you. And thank you for being such great friends. And I hope that once COVID-19 is done, I'll be able to come to your synagogue too.
I look forward to it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Marvell, thank you. Josh, I know had to hop off. I thank him, but you are an incredible guy, and we appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good
All
night.
right, everybody, have a good afternoon. We'll see you.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.